Welcome to Redefining AI, where we explore the cutting edge of artificial intelligence and its impact on society. Now, today we're thrilled to welcome a distinguished guest, Professor Emeritus of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington, an individual who has certainly, and it's very visible, made significant contributions to AI and data science. Our guest, Pedro Domingos, is an author of various books, including 2040 and The Master Algorithm. He's received a number of differing accolades, such as the SIGKDD Innovation Award and the IJCAI John McCarthy Award. Now, in this episode, Pedro and I were certainly hoping that we can explore the themes from his latest book, 2040, which does demystify AI and address the hype and fear that is surrounding AI per se. We hope to discuss how AI is reshaping politics in the sense that looking at how it is particularly targeting voters and campaign strategies, delving into the concept of AI as a tool for enhancing collective intelligence. Now, with over 200 technical publications to his name and a wealth of experience in the field, I'm sure that our guest will share some thought-provoking thoughts and insights with us today. So welcome, Pedro, to Redefining AI.
Thanks for having me.
I just asked you what time it was. You're based in the US, is that right?
Yeah, in Seattle on the West Coast. So it's about midnight.
Midnight, okay. So we're here based in Zurich, so it's actually 9:10 in the morning. So we're representing various different components of the night, the day. You mentioned you're a night owl, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, but that's normal among computer scientists.
Did you always want to be a computer scientist?
No, not at all. Growing up, I was interested in everything. So I actually had a very hard time deciding what I wanted to do. But when computer science came along as something that I could major in, at that point, it was immediately clear that computer science was the thing for me. And then even more than that, when I found out about AI, which was really almost by accident towards the end of an undergrad, I just became increasingly fascinated with it and, never looked back.
What fascinates you about it?
Several things. I found out about AI because I saw a book in a bookstore called Artificial Intelligence. And I thought, what could that be? Right? What does that represent, that term artificial intelligence? So I read it and I immediately thought a few things. One was that, okay, I get it. I get what these people are trying to do. But the two important things were, well, if you can do this, if you can really do this, if you can get computers to reason and have common sense and understand language and vision, this will be the most important technology in history. It'll change everything. So, I want to work on something important. But the other side of it, which maybe is a little less obvious now, is that this was in the 80s when I was an undergrad. So this was a while ago. The state of the field was so primitive. I remember, back then, nobody was interested in machine learning. There was a chapter on machine learning towards the end. And I remember thinking, this is ridiculous, right? They have no idea what they're doing. But if you can do machine learning, but I immediately felt that like machine learning was the thing that everything else in AI depended on. So you have this combination of a field that is very important, but also very backward. Unlike, say, physics or biology, they're important, but boy, you have to march a long way to get to the, research front. Whereas here, you could start doing things right away. And I would say that even today, decades later, it is still the case that AI and machine learning are unlike most other fields where, a kid in a garage could start a revolution that the people with PhDs wouldn't. So those two things together, I found very, very powerful and very persuasive in terms of getting me interested in the field.
What interests me in all of that and what you've said, and it's actually evident in a lot of your expression. So you write a lot. We mentioned as well at the start that you have around 200 technical publications to your name. And obviously, preparing for this interview, I looked at some of the technical publications. I looked at your contributions that you've published openly on Medium. And there was one thing when you were talking about if the whole concept of artificial intelligence, and if you can get a computer or an entity to reason, then it would be something like quite impressive. There was one particular article on Medium where you talk about this well-known AI error, which is the homunculus fallacy.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I find it quite fascinating, having been involved in the field for a much shorter time than yourself, because it's something that you commonly see, that people have this well-known AI error, which would then also lead me post questioning that if you do believe that a computer will be able to reason in the future.
So the homunculus fallacy is actually something extremely important, because a lot of the misconceptions that we have about AI today, the public and even many experts, and a lot of the misguided fears, they derive from this homunculus fallacy. So what is it? Well, first of all, what is the homunculus, right? It's this notion coming from psychology that your consciousness is like a movie, but who's watching the movie? And the idea of the homunculus means little man in Latin. So the idea of the homunculus is that inside your brain, there is this little man that is watching what is going on. This, of course, even in psychology is a fallacy, because there's no little man. Your brain is your brain, right? Your consciousness is not some movie screen. But in particular, in the context of AI, I don't know who coined this, but it's a very inspired term. It's this illusion that inside every AI system, there is a little man with all the characteristics of a human being, with the biases, with the emotions, with the consciousness, with et cetera, et cetera. So we have this irresistible tendency, you see that with ChatGPT, for example, to project onto it all of these human qualities, human reasoning processes that are completely different from what is really going on. So, one of the most important things that I think we as experts in the field can do is educate people a little bit to what AI really is like. And that's actually one of my goals in 2040, is to present an AI. So, 2040 is the story of a presidential election where one of the candidates is an AI, right? This is, of course, a satire. And my goal is to present an AI as it really is, as opposed to Terminator, which is Hollywood, unfortunately, really feeds on this homunculus fallacy and fosters it. The AIs and the robots are all humans in disguise. And Terminator is like a human who wants to kill others and whatnot. And the real AI is very different. So I'm trying to awaken people to what the real AI is really like and combat the homunculus fallacy.
Fascinating. So obviously, in mentioning 2040, you want to display AI in this as the principal character in the book?
Great question. So PresiBot is, you could say, one of the protagonists of the book, but PresiBot is not a character, actually. In fact, so PresiBot is a robot, and I systematically refer to it in the book as it, even though there's an irresistible temptation to refer to it as he, which I might even fall into during this very interview, right? But the whole point of so the real characters in 2040 are the human characters. In particular, the real protagonist is Ethan, the CEO of the startup that has built PresiBot and entered him in the presidential race as a stunt, as a publicity stunt, like, of course, AI startups really do. That's another part of the book, is this, satire of the world of AI startups and tech. So PresiBot is a machine. It's a program. We see them debugging it, fixing it, modifying it, worrying, it's like ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT to regular users sounds like a human, but it isn't. It's a mechanism that can sound very articulate and whatnot, but it's really just a program stringing words together. And PresiBot is exactly, PresiBot is ChatGPT fine-tuned for politics, if you will.
And I think with that sort of motioning narrative, you also express the fact that you want to demystify AI and sort of puncture, I would imagine, the hype and the fear that surrounds it, especially when it comes to the use of AI as both like a flawed human enterprise, but it's also capable of wonders and absurdities, because you're very pro AI in what you promote, your expression, etc. So when demystifying AI and puncturing the hype and the fear, why did you choose this particular contextualization of political campaigns, voting?
Right. So, first of all, there is very much one of my aims is to demystify AI, because I think that both the hype and the fear, they feed on this image, which people naturally have, of AI as there's some kind of, technical geniuses at these companies that are inventing amazing things. And it just ain't like that. In fact, we're more like a bunch of monkeys at the keyboard, typing until Shakespeare comes out. This sounds absurd because there is a certain level of technical sophistication that you have to do AI, but that only gets us to the point where effectively we're trying things at random. I could go through the list of all the major things that happened that led to where we are today. Every one of them was something that wound up working for a different reason than the people developed it for. So it's been a series of accidents. It's like the random mutations of evolution. The most famous one of these is GPUs. GPUs are essential to modern AI. They were invented to play video games. And another example is embeddings, right? Transformers are machines that use embeddings. Embeddings were created because neural networks didn't know how to deal with symbols. Nobody thought that nobody imagined that they'd be good for learning. So it's almost a comedy of errors element to AI.
A comedy of errors is an interesting
Yeah, it's a
concept
comedy
as
of
well.
errors, right? AI on the one hand is very exciting what's happening today, but on the other hand, there's like something farcical about what's going on, right? People have no idea how clueless the good folks at OpenAI and whatnot are. Again, no disrespect for them. There's many good people there, but there's a lot less that meets the eye than people think. Ironically, just as in the AI itself, or maybe consistently. Now, why politics, right? So let's say, think about it this way. You want to write a book that illustrates the world of AI startups and that demystifies AI. And now you need to pick, and let's say that you've decided that this is going to be the story of an AI startup, right? Because why not? That's the obvious thing to do, right?
Mhm.
So what does this startup do, right? What is the product, right? So for example, in Silicon Valley, which is actually the closest thing I know to this novel, is the TV show Silicon Valley. And there what they have is a compression algorithm, right? And it's a really funny show. I love it, right? But like, who cares about compression algorithms? It's too boring. It's not important, right? And another sort of like irony about Silicon Valley is that at some level, what goes on in there is incredibly boring, right? It's people like they're automating whatever, some boring function of that you need, right? That is important, right? But it's not exciting. But the people doing it are like, we are revolutionizing the world with this thing. And in reality, it's more mundane. But now, I think to write an interesting book, you want to up the stakes, right? So, and what is the biggest stake that you could have is like, this AI is a presidential candidate. And it turns out it's in an election, right? This is the other part of the story where the other candidate is actually someone who wants to abolish the United States. So as much as you think that this whole bunch of bumbling fools in this company is something to laugh at, if they fail, it's the end of America. And in fact, at one point, during this whole misadventure, the CEO talks to this, regular guy who's a driver of an automated he's the driver of a self-driving truck, which itself is a funny thing.
Yes.
And he asks him, so, like, who are you going to vote for? And he says, like, well, if the other candidate called Georgine Bull wins, it's the end of America. But if PresiBot, the AI candidate, wins, it's the end of humanity. So the least of evils, I'll pick the end of America. So having politics ups the stakes. It also gives me a chance to satirize a lot of other interesting things that are happening right now. So, for example, in particular, the state of American politics right now is really ripe for satire. Really, I don't think there's a better genre to talk about what is going on in American politics this very moment, the candidates, the situation, the issues or not, than satire. So in a way, these two things, were made for each other. Very concretely, however, I had this idea about writing a novel about, AI in Silicon Valley for a while, but I couldn't think of a good actual, what would it be about? The story came to me because a journalist, in an interview like this, that was, touched a lot on AI politics. At the end of the interview, she said, so would you vote for an AI for president? And I had to think for a second about that. And then I said, this was in 2018, back when Trump was president. And I said, well, no. But if the other candidate was Trump, then yes.
Okay.
So if the other candidate is bad enough, then, voting for AI is the least of evils. And I would submit that today, maybe ChatGPT, for all its limitations, would be a better president than either Trump or Harris.
Mm-hmm.
So, at that point, the story just started to write itself and never stopped.
So the component that I'd like to pick up on there is obviously you mentioned that if PresiBot wins, that it would be the end of humanity. And it's obviously representative of an AI system per se that's classified as non-gender specific. Why would it be the end of humanity?
Well, of course, it would absolutely not be the end of humanity at all. And hopefully people will take that. Like, there are multiple ways in which the PresiBot can't be the end of humanity. First of all, it has no intention to kill humanity, right? It's just a product that this company is making. It wouldn't be capable. It's too incompetent, just as ChatGPT. So there are multiple reasons. But the key point here, and again, everything in the novel is trying to illustrate some real point, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the campaign, the campaign of the other candidate, they decide strategically that the line of attack they're going to take against PresiBot is to paint him as a Terminator-like danger to humanity. If this guy wins, he'll take power, or it'll take power, and then it'll exterminate humanity. So that's what the poor, uninformed people who just see the TV commercials and the attack ads and whatnot think about PresiBot, and that's what this guy's illustrating. So he thinks PresiBot is a menace to mankind, even though PresiBot is nothing of the kind. But again, that's what the impression that people have from watching films like Terminator and so on.
Excellent. So if we look at the actual perspective, and maybe from your own analogy, how do you envision then AI per se changing the whole political landscape, especially in terms of like campaign structure, voter targeting? How do you envision it being used in the future?
Great question. Because the thing is, as much as the book is mostly a satire, it actually has a number of entirely serious underlying points, which I also hope people will cotton on to. And one of them is precisely that, number one, AI is already transforming politics in a couple of ways. One of them is targeting, right? Using AI to target voters is not a new idea at this point. Karl Rove started to do it back when he was Bush's strategist. Obama in 2012 was the big leap forward. His campaign they had a whole operation to do AI. And you could argue that that's how he won the election. It was close. He targeted much better than Mitt Romney. He won almost all the swing states. Fast forward to today, the politicians talk about privacy from both parties, but when it's about getting them reelected, forget that. We're targeting you with everything that we can, all the information that we can. This is one aspect. Another one, which is very underappreciated, is that AI, people worry about AI flooding the world with this information and undermining democracy. On the contrary, AI is an essential tool to combat this information. Without AI, as used by the likes of Meta, Google, etc., it'd be hopeless. But none of this is even the most important part. The most important part is that the future of politics, the future of democracy, is to be based on AI. We see only experiments along these lines today, but this is where we are going and where we have to go, because the autocracies, China to the fore, are already using AI for their purposes to the full extent that they can. They're making autocracy better with AI, unfortunately. We need to make democracy better with AI, or we're host. And in particular, AI can, for example, improve participation, improve representation. I can have a model of me take part in the political process. I don't have the time or the patience, but I can still be represented and be heard via my model, with my consent, with my direction. And my representatives can use my model when they want to know what the people want and what they think. The whole process is going to be suffused with AI and be better for that.
Yeah. And I think it's that infusion as well. And maybe if we take a step back for people that are less familiar with the implementation and the actual usage of AI in targeting and political campaigning, maybe if you go back to the example that you highlighted with Obama, could you outline ways in which AI is specifically being used in targeting or campaigning, just so that people understand a little bit more?
Yes. So, for example, the Obama campaign was quite feminist in this. There's even a book about it, or several. So, Obama hired a data scientist as the chief scientist of his campaign, Raid Ghani, a colleague of mine that I knew from the community. And he set up a whole large team of people so number one, they collected all the data that they could about, you and me, the voters, from social media, from demographics, data that you could buy from the companies that sell it. So they collected data. And then what they tried to do for every voter, focusing in particular in the swing votes in the swing states, because that's what matters, what are the issues that they care most about? What do they believe or want to hear about those issues? How can you sway them, right? And then what they did, this is actually the best part, they had this system called the optimizer. They really had this system called the optimizer that every night the system ran to figure out who are the people that the campaign volunteers should go out and target the following day. knock on their doors, and talk to them with a list of points that the system predicted would be the most persuasive ones for them, right? What do you really care about? Do you really care about abortion? Do you really care about, immigration? Or like, what should I tell you to persuade you? So they focused on the most persuadable ones. And they did this continuously every day of the campaign, from the beginning until the end. While they were doing this, Mitt Romney, the campaign was just using the usual coarse polling, 20th century political technology. And Obama just wiped them out. It was that simple. In an election that is not very close, this kind of techniques at this point is not powerful enough, maybe, thank God, to make the difference. But in a close election, the side that does this better will win and the other one will lose.
Yeah. One thing that you've also written about yourself as well is the concept of recommendation systems. So maybe take the comparative of, if people are familiar with, which they are, Netflix, so that there can be then an informed vote of who and what to vote for. Can you maybe expand on that idea that you yourself have spoken about publicly and, as I mentioned, your contribution on Medium?
Yes. You have to start by realizing that by far, the most important application of AI in the world today is recommendation systems. ChatGPT is very fun and sexy, but it's not that important. Maybe in the future, its descendants will be, probably. But at this point, recommender systems are the systems that help you choose a product to buy, a movie, a book, music to listen to, Spotify, Netflix, Amazon, they all use them. Facebook, Twitter, etc. They use recommender systems to decide which posts to show you. Google, by a different name, uses that to decide which search results to show you. So basically, in this world of infinite choice that we're in, the recommender system is what lets you have, Amazon, a bookstore with millions of books, which you could never walk, in a physical bookstore, you can, there's the 10,000 of them. You can walk through there, right? And now the argument that I'm making is that we should use this technology, which at this point is extremely sophisticated, as you can imagine, in politics. I was actually just literally yesterday, we have a primary election here in Washington State, and I was going through the voter pamphlet, looking for endorsements and information online, trying to figure out who to vote for. It's not easy. I'm about to vote for someone for governor of the state of Washington, and the amount of information that I can find about them at the end of the day is kind of small, and it's hard to tell who's really good and who isn't, and even the leading candidates. Like, why can't I have AI help me with that? I really should, right? There's no reason why that can't happen. And the result is we'll have a better democratic process, people whose vote is more informed. The politicians will have to, up their game and be better, right? So there's all these things that flow from having recommender systems be used in politics.
But I feel like on the other side of the coin, so obviously there's a lot of criticism against recommender systems as well. It's not all promotion and the positive use that can lead to less maybe disinformation. It might not be an argument around disinformation, because I think that, as you've mentioned as well, it's about our attention to information per se. What is the critique against the use of recommender systems in situations like this, though, when it comes to, political leadership, choosing a president or prime minister?
Well, I have noticed, making this argument, that a lot of people are very resistant to it.
And that's the thing, that you do hear a lot of people are very resistant to it.
Exactly.
That's why.
And I think not to put words in their mouths, but my understanding is that it's two main things. One is that they feel, and this is a perfectly justifiable fear, that these systems will be used to manipulate you. Now, they could be used to manipulate you, but again, Amazon could use their system to manipulate you to buy the books that they want, or Google, or etc. But again, but there's a couple of answers to that. The first one is that Google is the success it was because they bought this company that did, search, ad targeting. But the big difference that they introduced, a decisive one, was that company mixed in the ads with the organic search results.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at a page of results and I couldn't tell which were the real ones and which one were the sponsored ones. As a result, which they thought would be the way to make more money. But no, because as a result, I, the user, I don't know whether to trust that, so I ignore all of it. And Google said, no. On the left side of the screen, we're going to have the organic results. And on the right side, well separated, clearly different, we're going to have the sponsored ones, right? And that's how they became a $1 trillion company. The same thing will apply in politics. The voters are not stupid. They don't want to be manipulated. They will favor the recommender systems just as they do with the search engines that actually try to help them as opposed to put one over on them. So there's actually an incentive in the system for it to work well. Now, of course, the politicians and whatnot will still try to pull, to do what they do, right? And AI does give them more power to do that. But here's the thing. They're already doing that right now. The way to combat that is to have AI on the other side, on the side of the voters. The journalists need to have AI so that, for example, when the politician says to you, I'll do this, and to me, I'll do the opposite, somebody comes to them and says like, look, I'm flagging you. How come you're telling her one thing and him another, right? So they're already using AI, right? So that fear is justified, but as in many other things, it's actually a very recurring theme. The only way to combat that is with AI on the other side. This is one thing. The other objection I think is a little fuzzier, but I think it's people feel that somehow recommender systems and politics do not mix.
Okay.
And I don't mean a recommender system exactly of the type that you have in Netflix, for example, but this idea of having AI help you make choices, I think is just as important in politics as in anything else. And I think it's just a mental adjustment that people have to make, that we may now, when we think of recommender systems, think of banal products, and politics is important, right? But the thing that is actually ironic is that people are better informed about what shampoo to buy today than about who to vote for maybe not president, but many important measures and positions and whatnot, like representatives, that are actually much more important.
And I think that's actually you hitting that specific component, or maybe sort of less complexly said, the nail on the head's there, because it is about the individual choice. And I think that there's that emotional attachment to actually having the perception of being in control and being in control of your choice, of your decision. And there's no dispute. And certainly we are better informed about our shampoo or our soap, or obviously what car washing material to buy. But I think that there is the huge opportunity, as you've mentioned, to avenue and usher AI into a more democratized fashion of making sure that it is accessible on all sides of the coin, and that everyone that's involved in choice around this important topic does have the opportunity to use it.
Exactly. I mean, I would even say that the use of AI for something like politics is important because, let me actually put it another way. In a way, the more important something is, the more you should use AI for it. Because what is the point of AI? Is to increase our intelligence. Again, AI is not somebody else with their own agenda. AI is an extension of my own brain. So, for buying shampoo, I don't care. I go to the supermarket and I pick something from the shelf. For picking the president, my God, I want my full intelligence working when I do that. So the more AI I can use, the better.
I wanted to have a short and sweet conversation. The conversation's certainly been sweet. We've managed to cover a lot of different topics in this conversation. It has extended because it has been so interesting. So we've now gone over the 25-minute mark. Would you like to add anything before we part ways?
This was indeed a great conversation, of course. AI is a very multifarious thing, and we could only touch on a few of them, but I trust that, your listeners, through your other shows and everything else will, keep up with all of these things and pick up on more of them.
Certainly. I think that what we can leave as a parting thought is obviously the enticement that you've laid out today in the encouragement of accessing your book. So that's 2040, a Silicon Valley satire. And we can all delve into the AI PresiBot and look at what happens in that journey with PresiBot and the polls and the tech giants and everything that's interlaced into that narrative. So yeah, I look forward to continuing the read. I've already started it, obviously, and I wish you well. And thank you very much for being here with us today on Redefining AI, Pedro.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank everyone else who's joined us today and followed the conversation. If you enjoyed it, then share it with your friend, share it with your mom, share it with your dad. Thank you.